Today, we're diving into a Victorian murder that was so unbelievably gruesome, so strange, it became a full-blown national obsession. But here's the twist. This is a story that doesn't really start in the 1800s. Nope, it starts with a shocking discovery, right here in our time, connecting the past and the present in a way you just won't see coming.
So, to really get our heads around one of the 19th century's most infamous crimes, we actually have to jump forward more than 130 years, to a place you would never ever expect.
Okay, picture this. The year is 2010. We're in Richmond, a perfectly nice, quiet suburb of London. You've got workers doing some routine digging in a garden. But what they're about to pull out of the ground is anything but ordinary.
Yeah, you heard that right. The Sir David Attenborough. Turns out his property just so happens to be the site of a former Victorian cottage, and that cottage, well, it had a very dark secret buried just a few feet beneath the soil.
A human skull, boiled and battered. And just like that, with that one discovery, a case that had been cold for over a century was suddenly red hot, connecting our modern world directly to a story of shocking brutality that once held an entire nation in its grip.
The discovery of that skull brings up this really fascinating question, and it's one that people were asking themselves even way back in the Victorian era.
You know how it is. One horrible crime happens, and it's a massive sensation. Front-page news for months. Another one happens the next day, and it barely makes a ripple. So what's the difference? What makes one murder unforgettable?
And hey, this isn't some new question we're asking. Check out this quote from a newspaper back in 1871. Even the Victorians were scratching their heads, wondering about their own weird, selective obsession with crime.
Historians have a name for this phenomenon. They call it the cult of the criminal. And believe me, long before we had true crime podcasts and Netflix documentaries, the Victorians were turning murder into mass entertainment. We're talking souvenirs, sell-out waxwork exhibits, the whole 9 yards.
And you would be hard-pressed to find a better, more chilling example of this than the story of Kate Webster, the woman whose crime was so shocking it achieved what one expert called a dark immortality.
All right, let's wind the clock back to 1879. Our story is centered on two women living together under one roof in Richmond whose lives were absolutely on a collision course with disaster.
So on one side, you have Julia Martha Thomas. She's a 50-something widow, a bit eccentric, and really concerned with keeping up appearances. By all accounts, she was a pretty difficult boss. And on the other side, Kate Webster, a tall, strong Irish woman in her 30s with a very long criminal record and a whole bunch of aliases. These two couldn't have been more different. The relationship went south, and it went south fast. Thomas thought Webster was lazy. Webster thought Thomas was, in her words, very trying. It took less than a month for Thomas to fire her. But then she made a fatal mistake. She let Kate Webster stay on for just a few more days.
On March 2nd, Webster came home late, drunk from the pub, and it kicked off one last violent argument. In a fit of rage, she shoved her employer down the stairs, and then, worried she'd get in trouble for the assault, she strangled her to death. But what she did next, well, it was methodical and absolutely chilling. She dragged the body into the kitchen, cut it up with a razor and a saw, and then she boiled the remains in a huge laundry pot, filling the entire neighborhood with this foul, greasy smell.
A few days go by, and a wooden box washes up on the shore of the River Thames. Inside, mutilated human remains. The police were completely stumped, the public was horrified, and the newspapers had the story of a lifetime. They called it the Barnes Mystery. Nobody knew who the victim was, but everyone, and I mean everyone, wanted to find out.
Now, look, this was a gruesome crime, no doubt about it. But there were other gruesome crimes happening all the time, so why did this one absolutely explode into a national sensation?
I mean, just look at this. In that very same year, a guy named Thomas Perryman was tried for killing his own mother. Pretty awful, right? That case got about 92 newspaper articles. The Kate Webster case? Almost 600. The difference is just staggering. This wasn't just another crime. It was a full-blown media event.
So what was the secret sauce here? Well, historians have basically identified this perfect storm of 6 key factors that made the case totally irresistible. A criminal with a shady past, a whodunit mystery, shocking violence, a villain who fit right into people's prejudices, a dramatic chase and trial, and a story that just kept on giving new crazy twists. Kate Webster herself was right at the center of the storm. The press called her gaunt, repellent, and hardly human. They really leaned into her physical strength and her Irish background, basically painting her as this savage, masculine unwoman, which tapped directly into Victorian society's deepest fears about the working class and Irish immigrants.
And the thing is, Webster just kept feeding the fire. For 2 solid weeks after the murder, she was parading around in her dead mistress's clothes and jewelry, pretending to be her so she could sell off all her furniture. When the jig was up, she fled back to Ireland, kicking off this huge manhunt. And her trial? It was pure spectacle. It was so famous that the Crown Prince of Sweden flew in just to watch.
From the moment she was caught all the way to her conviction, Kate Webster's story was a runaway train, and it was heading for one heck of an unforgettable ending.
So after she's found guilty, Webster plays her final card. She pled the belly, an old legal custom where you claim to be pregnant to delay your execution. It was her last-ditch effort, her final audacious lie in a case that was built on them. Of course, a quick examination by a jury of women proved it was false.
Webster was executed, but her story was really just getting started. She became a star attraction in Madame Tussauds Chamber of Horrors for more than 60 years. And this grim, totally unproven legend started to spread, that she had sold the rendered fat from Mrs. Thomas's body as cooking drippings to unsuspecting neighbors and street kids. And that brings us all the way back to where we started. In 2011, after a ton of research, coroners officially confirmed it. The skull found in that garden in Richmond belonged to Julia Martha Thomas. The very last piece of the Barnes mystery had finally been found, 132 years later.
So the case is finally physically closed. But it leaves us with one last big question. The Victorians had their sensational newspapers and their waxworks. We have streaming series and true crime podcasts. The technology has obviously changed a lot. But has our fundamental fascination with this cult of the criminal, has it really changed at all?